What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so, I love the idea of doing full story videos. And the reason why, because it gives me the ability to take smaller videos I did in the past and combine those smaller videos together into bigger videos that you guys may enjoy. And honestly, I kind of see that you guys really do love my full story videos more rather than my smaller videos. And technically, I don't mind. I love the idea of you guys just loving my videos no matter what, because you guys have been amazing to me. But either way, I kind of realize that the last few full story videos have been all about the X-Men in different types of ways. X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force. And so I kind of felt like we should do things a tad bit differently, right? Let's go ahead and do a different kind of full story video. And so recently we have been covering the early days of Dick Grayson Nightwing, where our young hero had moved over to Blüdhaven. And so it's him trying his best to settle into his own version of Gotham. And technically, Blüdhaven is a whole lot worse than Gotham. But either way, here is the early days of Dick Grayson being in Blüdhaven. I do hope you enjoy. Okay, so I was kind of sitting down last night and wondering, like, okay, what should we cover on the channel? Because, I'm trying to find that perfect balance between classic DC and current DC. And the same goes for Marvel as well. But the problem was, though, I couldn't figure out what to cover when it came to classic DC. But then I realized that after Nightfall, really after you had Dick Grayson become Batman for Bruce Wayne for a short period of time after Nightfall, that DC finally gave Dick Grayson his own book. Because before Nightfall, Dick Grayson was more part of the Teen Titans than he was with the Bat family. But by Night's End, you had DC trying to push him back into the Bat books. And so after being in Night's End and also being Batman for a short period of time, it kind of let DC realizing like, hey, you know what? We should go ahead and give Dick Grayson his own book. And honestly, that was the right move. But also because there were so many Bat books back then in the 1990s. Because in the 90s, as we all know, DC was struggling behind Marvel, but also behind Image as well. But for DC, they still had one character, and that would be Batman. Like, Batman was just popular, and they had so many different Bat books. But some of those books belonged to other characters, like Tim Drake Robin and Catwoman. But for Dick Grayson, he did not have a book yet. Now, again, he was still part of the Teen Titans, while you had Robin getting his own book, and the same goes for Selina Kyle. But right after Night's End, you could tell that DC wanted to give Dick Grayson his own book. But before they gave him his own ongoing series, they gave him a mini-series to kind of test the waters, to kind of see if Dick Grayson could hold a book on his own. And honestly, he showed that he could. And so as we get into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with Dick Grayson being Nightwing. Now, while out there being Nightwing, he realized that there is a young lady in danger. Now, this young lady is going to be very important for the rest of the storyline that we are covering today. But for Dick Grayson, he kind of realized that she's in danger. Now, we see that apparently she made some kind of deal with some thugs. Now, she thought the deal was going to go in a different direction. But unfortunately, they're kind of like, nah, listen, we have a new deal. We'll go ahead and kill you off and go ahead and collect the money that was promised to us. Now, luckily for her, you had Dick Grayson step in and be that hero Nightwing. Now, for me personally, I kind of love the opening pages of this storyline because it's just Nightwing being Nightwing out there beating down on some thugs, but also kind of reminding us that he was the first Robin, that this man was trained by Batman, like he can hold his own no matter what. And so you have Dick Grayson be able to take down the thugs and save the young lady's life. But right after being able to save her life, we do learn that he was being watched by Batman. Now, this conversation is really important because it's Bruce and Dick kind of like finally be able to sit down with one another. And the reason why I say finally, because when it came to Dick Grayson, he had been with the Teen Titans for a good period of time. And so for Batman, he was on his own. He had Jason Todd, he had Tim Drake, but now it's Dick Grayson being back in Gotham away from the Titans. But the thing is, it's Dick saying, you know what? I want to quit being a hero. Like, I'm officially done. Because to him, when he was Robin, he realized that, yes, he was Robin. He was Batman's first sidekick. But also, he was not himself. He was not Dick Grayson. And so that was one of the many reasons why he became Nightwing. But even then, he kind of felt like he didn't have a life that he truly wanted. And when he was Batman, he kind of realized that he couldn't be Batman. He could, but not as good as Bruce Wayne. But at the same time, he does not want to be Bruce Wayne. He is somebody who just wants a normal life. And so you have Dick Grayson say, you know what? I am officially retired. And so he takes off his Nightwing outfit and hands it over to Bruce. It says, you can keep it, store it, burn it. I don't care. I am officially done being Nightwing. Now, the following day, you had Dick Grayson go ahead and check in on the young woman that he had saved last night. And we do learn her name is Miggy. Now, when it comes to Miggy, she does play a very important role, but really only at the end of this storyline. Now, with that being said, for Dick Grayson, he does pretend that he was somebody who found her who was completely knocked out, and luckily for her, that his dear friend was a paramedic. Now, in reality, it's more of like, no, he was Nightwing, and he's all like, hey, you know what? She needs my help. I helped her, but she got knocked out in the middle of the battle. But while being at the hospital, kind of just being there, checking in on her, you did have her parents walk into the room. Now, her father will also be very important for the end of this storyline. Now, for Miggy, she's kind of like, you know what? Dick is kind of cute. I want to see him again. And so you have the two characters begin the whole idea of the possibility of them dating one another. But with Dick Grayson now being retired, is him kind of wondering what to do with his life. Now for Dick, we jump over to his apartment, and he's been gone for a good while, so the place is kind of like a mess. Now luckily for Dick Grayson, Alfred stops by, and you have Alfred being that great guy and begins to clean up the place. Now, you also have Alfred tell Dick Grayson that he brought some old paperwork that belonged to Dick Grayson's parents. Now, this leads into the whole idea of what we're going to see in today's story. But while you have Dick Grayson go ahead and look through the different papers that Alfred had brought over, he finds this note where apparently someone was making a threat towards Dick Grayson's parents 4 days before they were killed off. Now, this is huge because for Dick Grayson, as we all know, his parents were killed by a character known as Zuko. But it's now the book saying, like, what if it wasn't Zuko? What if it was somebody else who had killed off the parents of Dick Grayson? And so for Dick, he's wondering, where in the world did this letter come from? Now, for Dick, he realized the letter came from somebody in a different country, a country known as Kravia. Now, Kravia is just as bad as Santa Prisca, but here is the big catch though, because for Dick Grayson and his parents, they were part of a circus, and that circus did perform in that country. And so as Dick say, I have to go back over there to see who in the world was trying to kill off my parents, because apparently they saw something that they were not supposed to see at all. And that person had most likely got my parents killed. And so as Dick say, I'm going over to Kravia to figure out who killed off my parents. And so you have Dick Grayson go ahead and call over to the embassy so that he can get access into the country. Now, right off the bat, you have that guy tell the prince of the country, and that'll be Balsick. Now, for Balsick, he's kind of like, you said Grayson. I remember the Graysons, the parents. And so you have the book continuing the whole idea that maybe, just maybe, the people in this country are the ones who are responsible for the death of the Graysons. But either way, they said, listen, Dick Grayson is the last person we need to kill off to cover our tracks. And so you have Balsic call in an assassin to handle Dick Grayson. And that would be a character known as Good Old Bernie. Good Old Bernie. And apparently, Good Old Bernie is one of the best assassins in the world. And he kind of gives an example of how great he is by killing a guy off in just one single blow. And so for the prince, this guy should be good enough to handle Dick Grayson. So you have Bernie go ahead and head over to Gotham City. And so as we get into the ending of the first chapter, we do pick up with Dick Grayson hanging out with Miggy. Now, you have the two characters on a date. It's kind of like, dang, Dick Grayson is officially retired. Like, this is a man who's trying his best to be with a woman he cares for, possibly. But while hanging out with her, you have Bernie there. And so once the date ends for Bernie, this is the perfect time to go after Dick Grayson. So he calls out Dick by his name, like, hey, Dick, I need to talk to you about something very important. And so as we get into the second chapter of the storyline, we do pick up where Nightwing and also Miggy being right now confronted by good old Bernie. Now for Bernie, his main goal is get Nightwing alone so that he'll be able to, kill off Nightwing. But you have Miggy say, you know what? I want to spend more time with Dick. And you have Dick say, you know what? I love the idea of spending more time with you. Let me go ahead and take you home myself. And so unfortunately for Bernie, he's no longer able to get the chance to kill off Dick like he wanted to at this moment. But for Bernie, he's not done yet. He'll still try his best to kill off Dick Grayson down the road. Now, I do want to point out something when it comes to Miggy, because while you do have Dick and her go back to her house, where you do have Dick just dropping her off, but once again having a conversation with her father and her mother, you kind of see that Miggy is very clingy. It's kind of like she hates the idea of being alone or being left behind. And so it's her saying, Dick, like, hey, let's spend more time together. Let's have dinner together. Like, please don't leave me. But for Dick, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I got a phone call, but don't worry, I'm gonna call you. Now, there is a good reason why she is so clingy, and you'll see why at the very end of the storyline. But right after that, you didn't have Dick Grayson go home. Now, when he does go home, you have Dick realize there's something off going on in his apartment. And he realized that there's somebody in there who should not be in there. And that would be Bernie. Now, this is Bernie believing that Dick Grayson is just your regular day person. This should be an easy job for him. But that's the thing. Dick Grayson is not just your regular person. Dick Grayson is Nightwing. So you have Dick being able to hold his own against Bernie. Now, Bernie realized he has to retreat and come up with a new game plan. And so you have Dick just dip the heck out of there. Not Dick, sorry. You have Bernie go ahead and dip the heck out of there. But right after you have Bernie leave, you have Dick realize that Bernie had left behind his cell phone. Now, that right there is really important because you have Dick find out that Bernie has been in contact with, well, the country Kravia. And that tells Dick right there, like, okay, cool, you know what? I have to go now into that country to figure out what in the world is going on and what is their connection to my parents' death. But now we jump back over to the prince. Now you do have the prince be confronted by his father. Now his father is the prime minister, but you have the prime minister wondering why in the world his son, the prince, is trying to kill off Dick Grayson for. Now you have the prince say, listen, I don't need to give you an actual reason why. My word should be good enough. And apparently he wants Dick dead before a big moment that's going to kill off hundreds of innocent people inside the country. Now, with that being said, you also have the prince tell the guards to lock his father up in his own room because his father is not acting like he should be. And so it kind of shows this is somebody who's drunk on power at the moment. But getting back over to Dick Grayson, this is now Dick Grayson realizing that he has no choice but to go ahead and become Nightwing once again. But also, he must go over to Kravia to figure out why in the world they're trying to kill him off. What is their connection to his parents' death? And so you have Dick go over to the Batcave. Now, Bruce and Tim are not there, so it's only Alfred. But this kind of leads into the new era for Nightwing. And the reason why I'm saying that because he's retiring his old outfit and getting a brand new one. The one we all love in the 2000s and of course the 2010s as well. But either way, it's Dick realizing that he needs more information about the country. Now, around this time in DC Comics, Barbara Gordon was no longer Batgirl. She was your good old Oracle. And so she was able to collect enough information to help Dick out, to figure out how to get into the country, but to know everything about the country as well. But also find one person who could possibly help him learn more about his family. And that would be the Prime Minister. And so we do see Dick Grayson finding a way to sneak into the country. And of course, it's a good old, let's just parachute into the country. Now, while you have Dick Grayson trying to fly into the country, we see the prince go ahead with his plan to kill off a bunch of innocent people. We learn here that he's right now trying to kill off a bunch of minorities, people who are dark skinned. And so it's him saying, you know what, y'all do not deserve to live in my country. And so he's out there trying to kill them off while you have Dick Grayson just flying into the country. But as we get into the second chapter, we pick up with Dick Grayson being able to land in the country. Now, unfortunately, he does have to fight against a few guys who work for the prince. But while trying to do that, he gets a phone call. And that phone call is from Miggy. And apparently it's her calling out for help. But the problem is the dude is now on the other side of the world. And so with her trying to call out for help, it's kind of like, what in the world is up with you? And also, like, how can I help you when I'm across the world? And so as we get into the third chapter, it's really more of us picking up where the last chapter had left off at, where you have Dick Grayson fighting against more guards that belong to the prince. But at the same time, he's on the phone with Miggy. And the thing is, she's crying out for help. And she's saying, please don't hit me. Now for Dick Grayson, he has no idea who's hitting her. And the thing is, she's not telling him who's trying to hit her. But either way, for Dick Grayson, he has no choice to go ahead and just like end the call because he hears some people nearby who are screaming out for help. Now, these people are dark-skinned people who the prince is trying to kill off. And so you have Dick Grayson be able to help out those people. Now, after doing that, it's also Dick asking them to help him out to get inside the prince's home or castle so that he is able to interrogate the prince. And the thing is, Dick Grayson does get that help. But right after you have Dick Grayson be able to find a pathway that supposedly leads him into the home of the prince, he is knocked out from behind by the same guy he just saved, the same guy who promised to help him take out the prince. And we come to find out, the guy said, listen, they were going to kill me and my family earlier. And so I'm kind of wondering if I give you over to them, will they then leave me alone and also my family? Now, for Dick Grayson, he's kind of in luck here because even though you have the prince take off his mask, the prince has no idea what Dick Grayson looks like. And so you have Dick Grayson kind of pretend that he's somebody who's working for, well, Dick Grayson. And so you have the prince say, you know what? I know the best way to handle you, the best way to deal with you. And so we kind of find out that they took Dick Grayson over to the pit. Now, this pit is really important because they're going to throw some honey down there. And with the honey being down there, of course, it's going to attract the rats. With the rats coming out, they're kind of hoping that it'll eat Nightwing alive. Now, we also kind of find out that Dick Grayson is not the only person in the pits. It's also the Prime Minister, the prince's father. Now, this is where we learn everything that's going on inside this country and their connection to the Graysons. So we do learn that apparently there was a prince, and this prince was very young. Now he had a scar on his face, but his father was killed off. So get the idea that with the death of his father, it automatically made the prince become the new ruler of the country. Now, we do learn here the prime minister right now is not the actual father of the prince we're talking about. These are two different people completely. And with that being said, when it comes to the prime minister, he hated the idea that his country was being led by a young boy who was horribly scarred a while back. And so we kind of find out the prime minister also had a child, a young boy as well. And so what he did was he also scarred his son. His game plan was to get rid of the current prince and replace the prince with his son. And it actually worked out, all because of the Graces. Let me explain. And really not because of the Graces, because who they work for, because remember, the Graces were part of a circus, and that circus came over to this country to do a show. But when they had arrived, you had the prime minister and a few other people be able to work together to get rid of the current prince by, well, tricking him into a different tent. And so while they had killed off the other prince, the Graces saw what happened. Now, the Graces, they stayed quiet, but yeah, they saw someone get murdered. Now, after you had the prince die off, you did have this prime minister put his son in the role as the current prince of the country, and you did have the prince say, you know what? Let my father be the prime minister. It was a complete takeover. The problem is that the way he raised his son had become so corrupt, so evil. And so now his goal is to hopefully stop his son before his son can kill off innocent people across the country and do even more corrupt things in the country or possibly around the world. Now, while you had Dick Grayson the entire time hearing that story, he was trying his best to get the heck out of that, well, prison. And luckily for him, he was able to get out of that prison, but to also be able to get the prime minister out as well before he was eaten alive by, well, the rats down there. Now, once you have Dick Grayson be able to escape with the prime minister and also take out the guard, it does seem like for Dick Grayson, everything should be good now, and he should be able to find the prince. The problem is that he's then confronted by a different guard who just goes ahead and just shoots Dick Grayson multiple times. But as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, we pick up with Dick Grayson showing us that he is okay because the brand new suit is bulletproof. So he is able to actually take those shots, get right back up, and fight against the guy who was doing the shooting. But here comes the problem though. You see, the prime minister, he got shot. And so right now, he's down for the moment. Now, you do have Dick Grayson be able to take the guy out and begin to help out the prime minister. Now, here's the thing. The prince has not told the people in his country that his father, the prime minister, is a traitor. And so because he has not done that, the prime minister was able to get a flight out of the country. And you did have our two characters be able to get back over to Gotham City. Now, once they do arrive back into Gotham City, you did have the prime minister be taken away over to a nearby hospital to get that bullet wound checked out. Now, he does tell Dick, like, hey, listen, I want to talk to you later on once I'm able to actually talk to you. And so you have Dick agree to wait for the man to actually recover. But let's not forget about the whole idea of Miggy, because she did call Dick Grayson earlier when he was on the other side of the world. And so for Dick Grayson, he's kind of like, you know what? Let me go ahead and see what in the world is going on with her. So once he does get back home, get a hold of her on the phone, she tells him like, hey, it's my father. He is a very abusive man once he had a few drinks inside of him. And so right now, it's Dick Grayson realizing that her father is abusive and she needs his help. The problem is that when he tries to leave, he's once again confronted by good old Bernie once again. Now, this time, the battle does go a tad bit different for Dick Grayson, where he's able to easily take out Bernie. Now, at first, the battle does seem like an even match, but this is Dick Grayson finally getting back into that Nightwing role all over again. So you have Dick be able to easily take out Bernie and move on with his day. So now his main goal is to go check up on Miggy. And so for Dick Grayson, on his way over to the home of Miggy, he's on the phone with her, and she's still being attacked by her father. Now, apparently, her father now has her at gunpoint, her and her mother. He's getting very abusive. But by the time you have Dick Grayson be able to get there to hopefully help out, he hears a gunshot. He's kind of like, oh my God, I'm too late. What exactly went down? Except when he walks in, he comes to find out Miggy is okay, and so is her mother. But her father is dead. She got the gun and she shot the man. And so you have Dick say, you know what? I will do anything to get the kind of help you need. And so, the cops arrive and everyone go their separate ways. So it kind of seems like the story is officially done, but it's not yet. Because we have to remember that he was told earlier to check in on the Prime Minister once he got help at the hospital. So now you have Dick Grayson go over there to figure out, hey, listen, are you guys responsible for the death of my parents? And so for Dick Grayson, he finds out here that no, they weren't. That basically his parents killed off by Zuko, and that was it. Now, they were thinking about killing off the Graysons, but then they heard the Graysons had died. And so they left everything alone. And they also said, like, hey, we were not going to kill them at all. And the reason why, because they were innocent people. And so for Dick Grayson, this case is officially closed. Now, the book kind of ends on a good note. And what I mean by that statement is that you have Dick Grayson meeting up with Batman. Now, when you have the two characters be able to meet up with one another, it's really more of Dick Grayson saying, I'm sorry. Now, the reason I'm saying I'm sorry because earlier in the book, it was Dick saying, like, you know what? I was unable to be my old man because of you, Bruce, because I was always trying to be like you. But it's also Dick realizing that Bruce was not trying to force Dick to be like him. Matter of fact, it was Bruce saying, like, be your old man, but at the same time, here are the skills you need to be a hero out in the field. But it's also Dick realizing that Bruce gave him love in a different type of way, but Bruce gave him love. And the same goes for Alfred as well. And so it's Dick kind of apologizing, but it's also Dick saying, like, I'm not done yet being a hero. Like, it's now time for me to have a new beginning somewhere else in the world. And so this leads into his first actual ongoing series where he does go over to Blüdhaven. But this is where okay, so a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, we had covered the Nightwing miniseries that came out in 1990s. And that was really more DC kind of getting a feel to see if fans would really love the idea of Nightwing having his own book. Because around that time, you had Batman, a lot of Batman books, but you also had a Robin book as well with Tim Drake. And so for DC, it was more of, let's see if fans cared for a Nightwing book. They did. The miniseries worked out. And so right after that miniseries, we got Nightwing's first solo book. And so I thought it'd be a cool idea to kind of go ahead and cover the first story arc of Nightwing's ongoing series, but also seeing the hero move into Blüdhaven. And really, as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, it's really more of us playing catch up because we pick up with Nightwing already struggling in Blüdhaven. The dude is about to drown because he has been cuffed to a refrigerator that's weighing him down in this body of water. And so we're kind of left to wonder, okay, how in the world did we get to this point right here? And so, of course, we have to backtrack to kind of learn what exactly happened earlier.
And so as we get into the flashback, we kind of pick up with Dick Grayson meeting up with Batman at the morgue. And here's the reason why, because there are 21 dead bodies at this morgue. They were all found in the river, and they all floated down the river from one particular direction, of course, coming from Blüdhaven. And so for Batman, he said, listen, all 21 men, their necks were broken, but on top of that, they all belong to one particular gang, better known as Angel Marins. And so you have Batman say, Dick, I need you to head over to Blüdhaven to kind of figure out what exactly is going on. Like, why is 21 gang members' bodies floating in a river coming from Blüdhaven, but also all their necks were broken? And so as we see Dick Grayson heading over to Blüdhaven, we already get the idea that Blüdhaven is just as bad as Gotham or possibly worse. It can't be better than Gotham. So it's kind of like, man, Dick Grayson, what have you put yourself into? Now, as soon as he arrives, he kind of sees how bad the city is because you do have this random girl being harassed by two random guys. And you have Dick Grayson being able to stand up for her, give her some money to send her back to Gotham. Matter of fact, he said, go over to Wayne Corp and tell them I sent you so that you're able to get a job, but to also stay away from this bad, horrible city. Now, for Dick, he now knows where to go first when it comes to figuring out who killed off all those different gang members. A rival gang, better known as Freddie Mean. Now, Freddie Mean is a gang leader, and he is a rival Angel Marin's. So it's kind of like, okay, cool. He has to be the person who's coming after Angel's gang. Now, once you do have Nightwing arrive at the home of Freddy, he sees the wife of Freddy freaking out. And the reason why, because another gang is there. And this gang does not belong to Angel at all. No, this gang belongs to Black Mask, another gang leader who usually works out of Gotham, well-known Batman villain. So the question is right now, why in the world is Black Mask False Face Society here right now in Blüdhaven? And so the Dick, that means is Black Mask slowly trying to move into Blüdhaven to put operation out here as well to build up his money. But for Freddy's wife, the reason why she's freaking out because they just took a fridge, and apparently she's saying there are kids trapped inside the fridge. And so for Dick Grayson, he has to save the kids' life. It's not fair that kids just got pushed into, well, a refrigerator. And so you have Dick Grayson being that hero, being Nightwing, just going after the False Face Society. Now, while fighting against them, there's one particular person who's going to be very important for the story arc. It's the one who wears the mask of the Fox. Now, for the Fox, he's trying his best to kill off Nightwing. He's doing all these different things. You also have the rest of the group also trying to kill off Nightwing, but it's Nightwing. The dude was trained by Batman, so he was able to kind of give them one heck of a beatdown. Now for Dick, he thinks like, okay, you know what? It's all good. Let me go ahead and open up the fridge. Except when he does, well, there are no children technically. You see, what happened was there was a briefcase being kept inside the refrigerator. Here's the reason why, because inside the briefcase is a bunch of egg cells. Now, these egg cells are basically eggs that were fertilized because for Freddy and his wife, they're trying to have children and they're going through this route to hopefully have children one day. And so the briefcase was being kept inside the refrigerator. And so for Black Mask, he got word about that and said, you know what? How about this? If I am able to steal the briefcase, I can put some pressure on Freddy to possibly have Freddy work with me or allow me to take over some of his territory in Blüdhaven. Now for Nightwing, he was distracted because he's kind of like, wait a second, I thought I was going out of my way to the child that was alive and being, stored inside a refrigerator. But in reality, it's just egg cells. But while he was being distracted, he gets knocked out from behind. And so that kind of leads us back over to the present day where we pick up with Nightwing at the bottom of the river trying his best not to drown. Now, apparently, before he had fell into the river, he was also able to grab the briefcase. So for Fox, he now has to go back to his boss to tell his boss that technically he had failed. Now for Dick, he was able to break free, get the briefcase, and swim back up to the surface. So once he's back up there, he realized, okay, all Black Mask crew had left because they believed, one, I died, but two, the briefcase is completely lost. And so you do see the guy wearing the fox mask call up his boss, Black Mask. And Black Mask is ticked off, like, dude, you had a job to do and you failed me. So, hey, I'm going to give you one more chance. But if you fail me again, you're going to die. Now, we do learn the name of this guy, and his name is Reynard or Renard. I do know that it is pronounced both ways, but I'm going to say Renard. But either way, for Renard, he's kind of like, yes, sir. I'm going to do my best, but of course you can see that he's freaking out because, again, if he fails, he's going to die. But now we transition over to, well, the police department where we pick up with Redhorn. Now, Redhorn is the chief, right? He's the man in charge. And you would think like, okay, he would be happy that Nightwing is there. This is going to be Nightwing's Jim Gordon. No, Redhorn is not happy about the idea of Nightwing being there, kind of telling us that there's some or a lot of corruption going on in the police department as well. But he does call in a detective. Now, this detective, his name is Soames, and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. I did see different ways to pronounce that name, but for Soames, he's kind of like this guy you call in when you want something handled. He's like, hey man, listen, even though you are a detective, I know you're the right guy to call when it comes to handling situations like Nightwing. I want you to handle Nightwing before he is able to kind of expose a lot of bad things about us. But while you have the two guys talking, well, Nightwing walks into the room. But as you dive into the second chapter, you're now seeing Nightwing and also Detective Soames or Inspector Soames in the middle of a landfill because the chief told him, hey, listen, take him right now, handcuff him, landfill, kill him, and we can move on with our day. Except you have Inspector Soames tell Nightwing like, hey, listen, I am not a bad cop. Matter of fact, I'm trying my best to get rid of corruption in this city. And so it's him right now trying to work with Nightwing here. Like, hey, listen, you and I need to work together to kind of slowly get rid of corruption in the city. And matter of fact, let me tell you what's going on right now at the docks. There is a whole entire smuggling operation going on right now. And apparently the law is not allowed to take care of that operation, but you can. And so for Nightwing, he's kind of like, okay, cool. So there are at least one cop here I can possibly trust. Now, with all that being said, you have Soames tell Nightwing, I'll tell my boss that you were able to escape by beating me down. And so you have Nightwing punch him as a way to have proof that, yeah, he did get beat down and Nightwing was able to get away. Now, for Nightwing, it's him kind of realizing that he's going to be in Blüdhaven for a while because there's so much corruption happening in this city. He needs to stay there for a good period of time. But this is also Nightwing saying, like, I need to prove myself. And here's the reason why, because when it came to Batman Nightfall, as we all know, Batman did not choose Nightwing at all. Instead, he chose John Paul Valley. And that really did bother Dick Grayson a lot. Kind of like, dude, you raised me, you trained me to possibly replace you one day maybe. And then you go out of your way to find somebody else to replace you. And that person went off the ledge and made things a whole lot worse for you and also Gotham. So why in the world would you do that? And so it's Dick saying like, you know what? I'm going to show him that I could be just as good as him, but here in Blüdhaven. Now, he does find an apartment. Yes, here's the thing, because it's also Nightwing possibly getting a brand new love interest because the person in charge of the complex, the landlord, she's kind of like, hey, come back tomorrow with the money and it's all yours. But he doesn't see her, but he does hear her voice. It's an Irish voice. He's kind of like, oh, Irish accent. Okay, you know what? I kind of like that. It's him already finding somebody to be with while moving into Blüdhaven. But after all of that, you didn't have Dick say, you know what, let me go ahead and begin to work on the whole smuggling operation that's going on at the docks. And so once you have Dick arrive there, he realized that he sees a bunch of vehicles being loaded onto a train. Now, you would think like, okay, exotic vehicles, got it, cool. No, it's older models. And so for Dick, he's kind of wondering, what in the world is going on here? Why these old vehicles being transported across Blüdhaven and most likely over to Gotham? And the reason why I say Gotham, because this whole entire operation is being run by Black Mask. And so for Dick, he's kind of like, okay, once again, time to get to work. And so you have Dick fight against all the different members of Black Mask gang here on this train. Now, their leader is the guy in the fox mask once again. And remember, his boss said, if you fail, you're gonna die. And so, unfortunately, he does fail because you do have Dick Grayson being able to take down, technically, the entire operation and leave. But the problem is right now, he still has no answers. He has no idea what was going on with that train and what were they really trying to transport there. And so now he's kind of wondering if Detective Soames is possibly a corrupt cop. Now, for Inspector Soames, we see him head over to the home of Freddie Mean to hand back over the egg cells that were stolen earlier in this storyline back to her. And so we kind of get the idea that he's possibly working for that gang. But you also have Soames asking where is Freddie, but his wife says he's still away on business. So we're still wondering, is he truly a corrupt cop? But you do have Soames meet back up with his boss. So you do have his boss tell him, like, you're on the Nightwing case. Like, your main goal is to find a way to get rid of this hero because Blüdhaven does not need a hero to expose all the different corruption going on in this city. And so for Soames, he loves the idea of being assigned to that case. But let's not forget, the guy in the Fox mask, Renard, he was told, like, if you fail once again, you're going to die. And so when he goes back to his apartment, well, there is another false-faced person there sent there by Black Mask to kill him off. Now, you do have Renard pretend that he was begging for his life. He gets on his knees, but in reality, he had a gun underneath his bed and used the gun as a way to escape this situation. But for him, he's now trying his best to figure out how to get rid of Nightwing. But as we dive into the final chapter of this storyline, is really more Dick Grayson just moving into Blüdhaven, but also is him trying to think, like, is there a possibility of him getting with the landlord? Because he loves her voice. He loves the way she talks. Now, he still hasn't seen her yet, but he still loves the way she talks. Now, for Dick Grayson, he already had a couple failed relationships, one very recently. And so for Dick, it's more of like, man, okay, gotta be careful. But at the same time, I am now the protector of Blüdhaven. I'm going to be out here, be that hero that his city needs at the moment. Now, you do have Nightwing meet up with Soames once again, but it's really more Nightwing saying like, hey, listen, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know who you actually are, because to Nightwing, it does seem like Soames is playing both sides, but at the same time, he is. But for Nightwing, he doesn't know that yet. But for Nightwing, he does realize the only person right now he can talk to and trust is Soames at the moment in Blüdhaven. And so you have Soames say, like, listen, all the old gangs are being pushed out by somebody. He does not know who, but all the old gangs are being pushed out. Now, for Black Mask, he's not the person doing the push out. Really, it's Black Mask trying to push in, but unfortunately, he's also getting pushed out as well. It's somebody else out there playing behind the scenes. But it's Dick saying, like, you know what? I'll trust you for now. Now, you do have Soames tell Dick, like, hey, you need to head over to this location called Allie's Bank. Now, Allie's Bank is in Z Moore area, and we do learn a tad bit more about Z Moore's area. Now, Z Moore is a particular area in Blüdhaven where technically the poor lives in. Like, there's tall towers, yes, but the poor live in those tall towers. Now, there's only one bank in that area, and that one bank is supposed to be for like DPAs and SSNs, but the problem is right now for Dick Grayson, he realized he has not seen any elderly person walk up to cash their checks. And so he realized that bank is a front. And so he goes inside and he meets the person in charge. Now, for Dick Grayson, it's really more of him trying to figure out what exactly is going on in Blüdhaven. But the rest of the book is really more of us now seeing a helicopter appear. And of course, it's the Fox guy once again trying to finish the job for Black Mask. Now, with the helicopter, he found a way to attach a device to kind of pick up the container to carry it away because it is holding a lot of money. But the problem is Dick Grayson is there. So you have Nightwing being that hero. And so the rest of the book, this issue, is really more of him just being able to be that hero and being able to stop Foxman once again. Now, after doing that, you then have Dick Grayson get a call from Batman. And it's really more Batman and Tim Drake on the line too, kind of like, hey, Dick Grayson, how's everything going in Blüdhaven? And you have Dick say, hey, you know what? I'm going to stay out here for a while. Basically establishing that he will be part of Blüdhaven, that this is his Gotham, and he'll be in here up until, like, you know, Battle for the Cowl, where you have Dick Grayson move back to Gotham because, you know, like, he became Batman. Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and continue our coverage over Nightwing from the 1990s. And the reason why, because I kind of love the idea of us exploring the early days of Dick Grayson being in a brand new city on his own, being in Blüdhaven, and also kind of seeing like what DC was trying to do when it came to his character, you know, giving him his own rogue gallery. And matter of fact, we're going to meet one of his first members of his rogue gallery, a character known as Lady Vic. And this kind of works out perfectly well when it comes to Lady Vic in her first appearance. And here's the reason why. Because remember, the only reason why you have Nightwing right now over in Blüdhaven is because 21 dead bodies had appeared over in Gotham. And so for Batman, he knew that all these different gang members, they belong to a certain gang that's being led by Angel Marin. The problem is that no one has seen him in a very long time. But for Dick, he went over to Blüdhaven to hopefully find him. And of course, he had no luck finding him at all. And so for Dick, he has no choice but to stay over time in Blüdhaven until he can figure out what exactly is going on in this city. But for Lady Vic, it's completely different, because with her, it's her saying like, hey, I'm a mercenary. I'm an assassin. You pay for my services. And so the problem is right now, she has not been paid. And so you have her going after different members of Angel's gang to hopefully find him so that she'll hopefully get paid. The problem is that for a while there, she couldn't find anybody who actually knew where Angel was at until she found somebody who could possibly lead her to somebody else who could help her to find Angel. And that will be Maxwell Reed, his lawyer. His lawyer might know where he's hiding at. But while you have Lady Vic getting that information, so does Nightwing as well, but from a different character. And that would be from a character known as Inspector Soames. Now, for Inspector Soames, he's this cop who's right now playing both sides when it comes to being a cop, but also helping out the crime lords in Blüdhaven as well. Now, technically, we do not know his overall goal here at this point in time in DC Comics. But for Dick Grayson, he does not know that technically Soames is playing both sides. And so for Dick, he believes that Soames is really a good cop that just has some good intel. And so you have Soames say, listen, if you're trying to find Angel, you need to find his lawyer, Maxwell. Now for Dick Grayson, his main goal is to stop a gang war from happening in Blüdhaven between Angel's gang and also Black Mask, who's trying to move into Blüdhaven territory. Now, for a brief moment, we do get a chance to see Lady Vic out of her superhero outfit, see her as a regular person, but somebody who might come from money. So you're kind of wondering like, okay, what is her actual origin? This is the starting point for us learning more about this character and what is her role in this storyline when it comes to Nightwing being in Blüdhaven. But now we're kind of able to shift our focus back over to Dick Grayson, which honestly works out because we're seeing Dick Grayson trying to be his own man. Like, yes, he got an apartment in Blüdhaven, but the problem is he needs some money to be able to pay for that apartment. So, you know, he gotta go get a job. And so he gets a job at a bar called Hogan's Alley. Now, Hogan's Alley is owned by a character known as Hank Hogan. Now, for Hank Hogan, he's kind of like, yeah, Dick, you know what? You're hired and you're going to work the morning. Now, for Dick Grayson, this is great. And the reason why, because this bar is a cop bar. And so for Dick, he should be able to collect different pieces of intel that could possibly help him bring justice into this city. Now, earlier, I had mentioned the fact that when it came to Black Mask, he was trying to move in on Blüdhaven territory. And so he has sent in the False Face Society, a group of people who just wear masks to hide their true identities, but still working for the Black Mask. Now, every single time they tried to make a move in Blüdhaven, they were stopped by Dick Grayson. But here comes the big catch. You see, they were getting all their info from one particular character, Inspector Soames. And so for the False Face Society, they're kind of getting upset about the idea of being stopped by Nightwing every single time. And every single time they make a move in Blüdhaven, it was coming from, Inspector Soames. And so they wanted to have a bit of payback. But then we kind of find out that Inspector Soames is working for somebody else who's trying their best to take over Blüdhaven. Now, getting back over to Dick Grayson, he does find a character who can possibly help him find Maxwell Reed. And that'll be a character known as Biff Tooley. And I really hope I pronounced that first name correctly. Now, for Tooley, he was just seen at the very beginning of our video when you had Lady Vic go to him to get information out of him. And so you do have Dick being able to collect more information from him about where to possibly find Maxwell Reed. Now, for Dick Grayson, he has no idea that Biff Tooley is being watched by the police. They're listening in. And so once they hear that Biff had just told Dick where to go, they call in Inspector Soames. So now we're getting the idea that Inspector Soames is most likely not really a good cop, more like a crooked cop. Now, Biff told Dick Grayson, hey, you can find Maxwell on his yacht. And so you have Nightwing head over to Maxwell's yacht, where, of course, he does find Maxwell. Here comes the problem, though, because for Maxwell, he freaks out, where technically I don't blame him. You wake up and you see a guy in a superhero outfit on your yacht saying, hey, I'm here to help you. No, I'm not gonna lie, I would freak out as well. But either way, you do have more guards come in to fight against Nightwing. Now things get even more complicated because you didn't have Lady Vic appear. Now, when she does appear, she has a hostage, and that hostage is Maxwell's daughter. But let's not forget that all of this is being done because everyone is looking for Angel. And we kind of find out that the reason why no one can find Angel because he is a prisoner for somebody else. And matter of fact, the mysterious person tells Angel, hey, go ahead and write down every single piece of information about your operations in Blüdhaven. So we're kind of left to wonder who in the world has captured Angel and what are they going to do with him? But as we dive into the second half of the story, it's now really more of us kind of picking up with Angel still being interrogated. The only difference is now you have our mysterious person as Angel about the different people who work for him. Kind of hey, what about this person or this person? And you have Angel kind of describe what each person's job is in his operation. But when it comes to Maxwell, he says, oh, that dude right there is just another lawyer. The only things he know is what I have told him, and that's really it. Which means that technically this whole entire next section is, pointless because you do have Nightwing trying to fight against Lady Vic, but at the same time trying his best to protect Maxwell, but also protect Maxwell's daughter, Maxine. And so after a few pages, you do really have Nightwing really being able to help Maxwell out and also protect his daughter as well. There's a small explosion on the boat, but you do have almost every single person who is important for the storyline being able to escape. So Nightwing, Maxwell, Maxine, and also Lady Vic. Now, all the different people who have worked for Maxwell is most likely dead. But really, when it comes to Dick Grayson, he does ask Maxwell, hey, do you know where Angel is at? And he says no, but technically I'm not the big guy you should be looking for who may know where Angel is at. That is somebody else. But he also tells Dick, dude, I'm not going to tell you anything at all about the other person that you should be looking for. Now, for Lady Vic, she is very angry at Nightwing, but the main reason why she's upset because she had lost her Bundy daggers. Now, these daggers are very important to her family. So, of course, she's kind of That dude right there. I want to take him down. Because of him, I lost something that was very close to me and my family. Now, the following day for Dick is him still continuing to learn more about Blüdhaven, how bad it truly is, because the next morning he has to go to work, right? And while working at this bar that's made for cops, he has cops coming in getting drunk. Now, for him, he believed that these are cops who have worked overnight. They're just getting off their overnight shift. But you have Hank say, no, those guys right there, yeah, no. They're going into the shifts drunk. And so it's Dick realizing that he's on his own here when it comes to bringing justice into this city. Now, for Inspector Soames, let's not forget, the chief of the police department told him, like, I need you to deal with Nightwing. And so you had Soames promise the chief that he will accomplish that goal. But after talking to the chief, he then goes to meet up with Lady Vic. Now, this is him paying her off, saying like, hey, listen, I heard that Angel owed you a lot of money. So how about this? I'll give you the money that you were owed, but also extra money as well, because I want to hire you. And so most likely it's going to be Soames try to use her as a way to get rid of Nightwing. Now, she does say, hey, you know what? I gotta leave. And the reason why, because she's heading over Gotham City. And so the last page is really more of us seeing her now becoming her true identity, better known as Lady Elaine. Now, for Elaine, it's her kind of coming from a family of money, royalty. And so we see her at this big time party where she does meet up with Bruce Wayne, kind of leaving us wondering what is her big game plan when it comes to Bruce. But with that being said, guys, please okay, so when it comes to DC Comics, I feel like there's always that one hero I kind of always go back to when it comes to me when I sit down and read DC Comics, and usually that's Batman. But really for me, it's not Bruce Wayne that kind of pulls me back into the DC world. It's the characters around Batman, so like Tim Drake or Jason Todd or Damian Wayne, and of course, Dick Grayson. So I kind of want to go ahead and continue our coverage over Nightwing when he got his first solo series in the early 1990s. Now, we already covered the first two story arcs when it comes to our boy, but now we're going to dive into the third story arc where it's finally him meeting the kingpin, or the new kingpin of Blüdhaven. And let's not forget that when it came to Dick Grayson, the only reason why he came over to Blüdhaven is because of Batman. You see, for Batman, he told Dick like, hey, listen, 21 dead bodies had just appeared in Gotham's river. All 21 dead bodies belong to a certain gang, and that gang leader is a guy known as Angel. The problem is that Angel had just disappeared by the time Dick Grayson got over to Blüdhaven. So in the last couple story arcs, it has been Dick trying his best to locate Angel. Now, in our last video, we had learned that somebody had kidnapped Angel, and they're currently keeping him as a prisoner as he writes down every single piece of information about his entire operation in Blüdhaven. But we have no idea where Angel is currently at, like who's currently holding on to him. And for Dick, it's also him trying his best to find Angel. But as we dive into issue number 6, it's really more of us now seeing Dick Grayson work at this bar. Now, this bar is called Hogan's Alley, and we saw this bar in our last video, but this bar is a cop bar. So it allows Dick Grayson to kind of work there and be able to collect intel on different things happening in Blüdhaven so that he can find different ways to bring justice into this city. Now, once you do have Dick being able to finish a long shift at that bar and being able to leave, he hears this voice that he knows very well. It belongs to his landlord, a woman known as Bridget Clancy. Now, for Dick, at first, he believed that she was an Irish woman because he never saw her face truly. Every single time he was around her to have a conversation, something was always blocking her face. But now he is able to put a face to that voice. It's a young Asian woman. Now she was born in Hong Kong, but she was raised in Ireland. So of course, that is why she has an Irish accent. But for Dick Grayson, he's kind of like, man, she's kind of cute. And now I have the ability to possibly build a relationship with her. But once you do have Dick Grayson being able to get back home for the day, he realized that somebody had broke into his apartment. Now, the first chapter we are covering is a team-up book. It's Dick Grayson and Tim Drake, the past Robin and the current Robin at this time in the 1990s working together. Now, Tim told Dick, like, hey, I'm going to stop by after Bruce and I had handled things with the Titans. They did, and so now Tim is here. But for Dick, he believes the reason why Tim is here is to actually spy on him for Bruce Wayne. Because for Dick, he's been here for a few weeks. And honestly, nothing has improved in Blüdhaven just yet, especially when it comes to the case that Dick came here to solve, the 21 dead bodies that belongs to Angel's gang. But Tim's like, no, I'm not here to spy for him. Technically, I'm here to just be with you. But really, it's kind of like Tim wanting to learn more things from Dick Grayson, because Dick was the first Robin, the first partner for Batman. But you do have our two heroes go over to the apartment that belongs to a character known as Maxwell Reed. Now, for Maxwell Reed, he is the lawyer to Angel, the current gangster or gang lord that is missing at the moment. And so in our last video, you had different characters go to Maxwell to kind of figure out where Angel could possibly be at. The problem is that for Maxwell, he had no idea. Now, in our last video, Dick saved him from a different character known as Lady Vic. And so because Dick did save him, it's Grayson saying like, hey, you owe me one right now. Like, you need to give me some kind of information that could possibly help me to locate your missing boss. And that would be a character known as Sonny Brewer. Now for Sonny, he was the guy Angel called in to kind of handle some bets that he did on the side when it came to his business, you know, to make sure that all the different bets kind of worked out for him. And so for Dick and also Tim, they find Sonny and their main goal is kind of tell him to hopefully figure out where Angel could possibly be at. Now, the only reason why Maxwell told Dick that piece of information is because you had Grayson say, hey, I was sent here by Inspector Soames. Now, for Inspector Soames, he's this cop that Grayson has been working with. Not John Wick, working with. But you did have Dick tell Robin, like, I know that Soames is no Jim Gordon. And matter of fact, I believe that he is a crooked cop who works for the mob. Now, this kind of leads into a conversation between the two characters. Because for Tim Drake, he kind of feels like he's out of place in the Bat family. And let me explain, because for him, he's the current Robin, right? You already had Dick Grayson, who grew up, became Nightwing. You had Jason Todd, who's currently dead, and now here's Tim. But the first two Robins, they were kind of invited into the Bat family to become Robin. But for Tim, he wasn't truly invited. And technically, he had to work very hard to prove to Bruce Wayne that he could be the next Robin, his next partner. But as Tim also saying, like, Dick, you are very athletic, and I'm not. I'm that computer person. But the problem is, they have Oracle, who's already that computer person for the Bat family. So where does Tim belong at? Now, it's also him saying, like, I don't plan on being Robin for the next 10 years. Like, my goal is to do my shift and go back to my normal life. And that is it. But he also says, Dick, you don't realize you're just like Batman in so many different types of ways. And that is why you two don't get along very well. Now, let's not forget that for Maxwell, he's the reason why Dick knows about Sonny. And so you have Maxwell meeting up with, well, good old Inspector Soames, this crooked cop. And so you have Inspector kind of like, in what right mind would you believe I would send the vigilante Nightwing over to you? Because now you kind of ruined things for us. You made things harder for us. And so you have the inspector just go ahead and kill off Maxwell just like that. But getting back over to our heroes, you have our heroes realize that Sonny has not come out of the building that he went into earlier. And so for our heroes, they believe that things are about to go south very quickly. And so you had him say, you know what? Let me go ahead and place a bug on his car so that we're able to follow him. But Dick realized that this is a trap. Sonny has not come out of the building in 20 minutes, which means two things. One, he's most likely dead, or two, this is a setup. Somebody most likely had tipped him off. And we already know it is the second one. Inspector Soames most likely had tipped Sonny off saying like, you're being followed by two vigilantes. And so by the time Tim got near Sonny's car, it blew up. And you have a bunch of guys out of nowhere begin to shoot at Tim. Now, luckily for Tim, Dick was there to help take those guys down and get Tim the heck out of there. But for Dick Grayson, that was a learning moment. But now we can kind of switch over to Angel, who's currently a prisoner. And the thing is, you have the person who has been holding on to Angel just go ahead and finally kill him off. And so now this person is trying to move into that position to allow him to become the kingpin of Blüdhaven. And so that kind of leads us into the next chapter where we're now seeing Dick going after different people who belong to Angel's gang, the important people who belongs to Angel's gang. And so with all these different people, once you do have Dick Grayson being able to take them down, it's him saying like, okay, cool, listen, so I brought you all here to kind of figure out where is your boss, because we all know that he's currently missing, and I kind of feel like you guys want to see him so badly. But one of the guys that Dick has captured tells him in a nice way like, no, we don't, because technically our new boss is still bringing in money for everybody. That money is still flowing. So why in the world do we care so much about our missing boss where we're still able to make a whole bunch of money? And technically the guy is right, but he does tell Dick this right here. You should go check out St. Anthony's, this church that's also a nursing home as well. And so you have Dick say fine. And when he goes over there, he kind of realized that this church is heavily guarded. Now for Grayson, he does not go in at all, but now it kind of gives him the idea of like, okay, why is this church so well protected? Who's in there that could be very important that could lead me into the new kingpin of Blüdhaven? Now, the next page is really more of us finding out, the cops really finding out that Angel is dead. We already knew he was dead, but the cops are now finding the dead body of Angel. And so now they're kind of wondering like, okay, who is now officially moving into that role as the kingpin of Blüdhaven? And for the chief, he wants to know really badly. And word gets out very quickly because you have Dick working another shift at that bar. But while doing that, he overhears the cops saying like, hey, they found the dead body of Angel. And for Dick, he kind of feels like that he is somewhat responsible for what happened to Angel, or the whole idea of the shift happening with the whole new kingpin coming into Blüdhaven. Now, there is some bright things going on in Dick's life. Like, for example, he's now able to get a date with Bridget, kind of build that relationship between these two characters. So we are seeing some new things happen in the life of Dick Grayson while being in Blüdhaven. But after all of that, you did have Dick Grayson get a somewhat call from Oracle. I say somewhat because it does seem like she was able to kind of just force her way onto his computer, but she does have some very important information for Dick, like the whole idea of who's currently being guarded inside that church. And she tells Dick that it's a woman named Joyce Elizabeth Desmond. And she is the mother to Roland Desmond, the second Blockbuster character in DC Comics. Now, there was another person who was technically Blockbuster, but he is dead by this point. But his brother had officially taken over. Now, for Roland Desmond, he was a very smart person at first, very intelligent, but like his brother, he began to take the steroids drug that gave him his super strength. The problem was that after taking the drugs, his intelligence began to go away. Now, luckily for Roland, he made a deal with a demon. And so with them doing that, he had regained his intelligence, but also kept his super strength. And so with that combination, he said, you know what? This is the best time for me to go ahead and become the kingpin of Blüdhaven. And so you have Dick call up Wally West to learn more about Blockbuster, to kind of see what kind of person he is at this point in time. And by this point, Wally had his own sidekick, Impulse. And Impulse had a few run-ins with Blockbuster. And Impulse told Wally, who's down telling Dick, like, hey, Blockbuster is completely different now. He's more violent, more brutal. Like, you need to be on guard if you go after him. And so you have Dick just being able to follow the paper trail. And with them following the paper trail, it led him right over to the brand new home of Blockbuster, where there he's then able to confront one of his old villains. Blockbuster is here now as the new kingpin of Blüdhaven. And so that kind of leads us into the next chapter where we're now seeing Nightwing fighting against Blockbuster. Like, this is establishing the whole idea that these two characters will do battle in this book or this series over and over again, because it's Nightwing trying to bring justice into Blüdhaven. Now, while you have Nightwing trying to fight against Blockbuster, you do have Blockbuster kind of show that he's very strong, but not as fast as Nightwing. But the problem is Nightwing only dodge for a certain period of time before Blockbuster is able to get his hands on him, which he does. And so for a brief moment there, it does look like Grayson is going to die. Now, for me personally, I thought Wally West was going to come in and save the day at the very last second. But no, it's actually Inspector Soames. He tells Blockbuster, like, hey, listen, if you kill off Nightwing, then most likely it's gonna bring in Batman, which then brings in more problems for us when it comes to us trying to take over Blüdhaven. And so for Blockbuster, he realized that Inspector Soames is correct, but it's also him saying, like, okay, I still need Nightwing dead, so let's try to kill him off, but in a way where it would not lead back to us at all, especially when it comes to Batman. And so once you have Dick Grayson wake up, he realized that he is completely surrounded by a bunch of bikers called the Loners. Now, these bikers, of course, they work for Blockbuster. The goal is, though, to have the Loners be the ones to kill off Dick Grayson. Then most likely Batman cannot trace it back over to Blockbuster. But of course, you do have our boy Nightwing being able to take these guys down very easily. But now it's also time for us to see another character who might play a somewhat important role in the whole idea of Blüdhaven, because we do pick up with Dick Grayson running into somebody who is homeless. And you have Dick give that guy $50 to kind of begin the process of him trying to achieve a better life for himself. But the problem is that right after Dick walks away, that homeless person does get attacked by somebody else. And apparently this person hates the idea of low-life people in his area. His goal is to clean up his block. Now, we have no idea just yet who this character is, but don't worry, very soon he will play a somewhat important role in the whole idea of Nightwing and being in Blüdhaven. But this storyline does kind of end on the note where you do have the Loners kind of head over to their boss, Blockbuster, to inform him, like, hey, we had technically failed when it came to stopping Dick Grayson, stopping Nightwing. And so for Blockbuster, he does not like the idea of them failing. So you have him just go ahead and kill them all off just like that. And then once they are dead, he's now then able to move on with his day. And so now we're kind of left to wonder, what is next for our boy in Blüdhaven, but also what can he do to hopefully stop Blockbuster? But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.